computer and stop your video. And my name is Jane Edstrom, and it's my pleasure this evening to welcome you all to the Throws informational session. We'd like to thank the National Officials Committee for hosting these webinars for us. It gives us a chance to link into the sport, even though we can't do it in the stadium. Tonight we have Irene Gaudette from Alberta is our presenter. She's a very experienced throws official. She's also a throws referee, and she's a branch chair of Alberta. So we are very, very fortunate to have her lead our webinar this evening on throws. So Irene, with no further ado, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks, Jane. So we'll just get started, jump right in. So we'll start with what is the role of an official? And the role of an official, obviously every official, is to provide for a fair competition. That's your job. So fair competition, allow the athletes to do their best, and that's about all our job is, really. So if we can do that, that's great. So what is the types of officials? If you haven't gotten your, let me see, there it is. Okay, your new rule book, there it is. Jane did a seminar on the new rules. So types of officials are in Rule 3. So just go there. That hasn't really changed. So the role of an official is to be knowledgeable. You have to know the rules. You have to apply them consistently, systematically, be aware of everything that's going on around you. You need to be caring, firm, consistent in your application of the rules and how you treat all athletes and coaches and spectators. Congenial, get along with everyone, chat with them, sure, but not only be impartial, you need to be perceived as being impartial. That is very important. So you can't be perceived as having any bias. So, and of course, in the appropriate uniform, and especially for higher level meets, you need to be invisible. There are cameras, and even at our smaller meets, you're going to have cameras and people watching. So they're there to watch the athletes, not the officials. Remember that. So we'll go through some of the rules here. And the rules come first from the World Athletics Handbook, formerly IAAF, so now we're World Athletics. There may be Athletics Canada variations. Of course, there's variations for junior development, so lower level meets. There may be meet-specific rules, so you need to go to the meet information, download if there are any specific rules for the meet, and then rules for special groups, Paralympic rules, Masters rules, and university rules. Those are different again. So you need to be aware of those, and if at all possible, get yourself a copy of them and refer to them. So the IAAF rules, of course, come from us. If you haven't gotten a copy, and I know with our situation now, it may be sitting in someone's garage or whatever. It's downloadable. There is the link for it. So, get a copy for yourself and determine, what the new rules are and how they've changed. They haven't really changed a lot, but it's been moved around. So some of the general rules that apply to throws: apply to most competitions. I won't go in detail to this in this. Just know there are a lot of, general rules that apply not only to every other event, but also to throws. Throwing specific events start at Rule TR 25, and that's these rules that are very specific to field events. And then the rules specific to throwing events are in 32 through 38. So take a look at your rule book, have them marked. Not sure if someone gave me the brilliant idea once. Mine, I have, there we go, little tabs marked for all of them. So get the tabs, mark them, then you know where they are. So I'm going to go through some specific rules right now that you need to note. The first one is CR 25-4, and that is the abbreviations to be used. So if you are marking, so you've got an event sheet, you're marking the distances, these are the other abbreviations to be used. Again, X for failed trial, dash for a pass, and of course the distance, but then these are some of the other abbreviations that you need to be using. And if you have some volunteers or new officials, point them out to them, let them know. Don't let them start using the wrong types of abbreviations. And that way when the results go up, results go into for entry, that there is no confusion with them at all. Page 88, TR 4.3, that this is just to reiterate that in the last round, so the 6th round, you cannot allow an athlete to take a trial in a different order. So we reorder after 3, like all field events after 3. So from the shortest throw to the longest throw, and then that goes rounds 4 through 6. And if people are coming and going, having another event, yes, we let them come back in, except in round 6. It has to be in the order. On page 97, TR 6.3 tells you the instances where assistance is not allowed. Then we're talking of coaching, video cameras, things like that. So please check those out. And 6.4 on the following page, on page 98, where assistance is allowed. This is a new rule where we're talking about changing competition order. Right now, the rules say that you will change a competition order after the 3rd round. However, this new rule says that the governing body may change the order of competition after the 3rd, after a subsequent round after the 3rd. So they can say, we're going to change a competition order in the 5th round as well. So be aware of that. Be aware that may be specific to the meet that you are working at. Time trials for throws, not usually an issue. The time for a trial is 1 minute, and only time you see 2 minutes is when you have consecutive trials, and that would basically be when you have 1 thrower. Otherwise, you don't often have consecutive throws. And we'll just move on from there. This is a new one for throws that no more than 2 implements can be submitted. Generally, that's not a problem. They don't wander around with a lot of hammers or shots usually, but you may get multiple discs. You may get multiple javelins. So no more than 2 per athlete. In discus, this is also new. If you are throwing out of a cage that has wings for hammer, you can bring those wings in up to the sector line. So this is especially for safety. So you can now bring the wings in and just up to the sector line. And so one other, this is page 197. These are the official implement weights. Remember, these are the minimum weights. There is no maximum weight. They want to be as close to the minimum as possible, usually. There are other measurements for implements, and if you attend a technical clinic, they would go over things like that. But these are specifically the weights, and that's usually what is out of whack on a lot of these. So we will move on to setting up a sector. Generally, our sectors are laid out, but not always correctly. So you need to know how to set up a sector and what to look for. So the first one is the 35-degree sector, or actually 34.9. So, easy way to remember. Go from the center of the circle. So you have to find out where the center of the circle is. Take a couple of tapes, find an X. Okay, there's the center. It's not always where it's marked. So, you know, find that center. You go out 10 meters, across 6, and back 10. So 10, 6, 10, or a multiple of that. So 20, 12, 20. So this is for shot, hammer, and discus. It's the same 35-degree sector. So please know how to set them up and how to check them. Okay. The other thing is when you're setting them up or you're checking a sector that has been laid out and you go, oh, the measurements are wrong. The measurements for the distance markers. Remember, when we're laying out a sector, you're laying out a triangle with the point at the center, but the measurements are from the front end of the circle. So you're going to be a meter, a little bit more, difference in measurement to what is laid out for the distance measurements. Okay, the other sector to set up is Javelin, and it's nominally about 29 degrees. And you start from the point on the that you measure from. So there's a little mark back. So you go out 40, across 20, back 40. So you're going to need a long tape to set up a javelin sector. Generally, it's set up. I've found they're usually pretty good, but you should know how it's been set up and how to check it. Okay, so we'll go onto the site, how to set up a specific site, how to place the officials, how to place the equipment, and then what to look at for the athletes when the athletes are now competing. So, start with shot. And again, this is what we had seen before. This is the circle. There's a stop board at the front, center mark. Fairly simple. We know what that is. Okay, this one. What we have is the chief judge, another judge at the circle who is watching the circle with the chief judge. We've got someone in the field marking. We've got 1, 2 people who are either pulling tape, so the 0 end of the tape in the field, and the other end out behind the circle, or if we're doing electronic measurement, someone with a prism out in the field and the EDM somewhere on the side of the circle. We will also have someone who is marking, who is recording results, a scoreboard, a timer, someone in charge of the athletes and the implements, and a retriever. So those are the officials or volunteers that can be out there. Which ones should be officials? Chief judge, of course. The second judge at the circle would probably be an official. The person marking in the field should be an official. Okay, you don't want any athlete or coach or spectator going, oh no, that wasn't where it landed. No. Know your official, have it there, put it down, mark it, that's it. And your first recorder should also be an official. Now we can combine some of these, and often we do. So, you know, the other person at the circle may also be recording. Your timer should probably also be an official. Why? Because if there are any questions, any doubts about when the clock was started, and we won't have any issues there. So combine some of them. So the volunteers can be the scoreboard, someone who is in charge of the implements, the athletes, the retrievers, obviously. And you can do the tape person or the prism person as long as they're holding it straight. And the other tape person, EDM, is probably someone who is familiar with the EDM. So those would all be done by volunteers. So the technique, again, shot is in close proximity to the neck. Doesn't have to be jammed right in, but close proximity. Hand in line with shoulder or in front. It cannot drop behind the line of the shoulder, and your hand cannot drop from the position, so you can't do this. So the other faults are exiting, so you can't touch the circle or the stop board. You can't push off, so push off the rim. There can be incidental touch on the first rotation if it is in the back half of the circle, but that is incidental, cannot be used as propulsion. And finally, the exit, you've got the circle marked with the white lines marking the center, so they have to exit on the back half of the circle. Quick on the equipment setup. Okay, you can change depending on the site itself. The athletes can be on one side or the other, but always have athletes on one side, the tape or the EDM on the opposite side, and you would have the retrievers coming back on this side. So you would have the tape or the EDM on this side. Here's your athletes, and the shots would come back on this side to be put back on the rack. Okay, we'll move on to discus. Difference here from a shot circle. Again, the diameter is larger, 2.5 meters, but it's the same 35-degree sector, and you will now have a cage. In all likelihood, hopefully you've got a cage. If not, it's going to be very dangerous, and I probably wouldn't work there. So again, who do we have? Chief judge, someone watching the other part of the circle, and you may have another official watching the other part of the circle. Because of the spin in discus, you want to be sure that, you know, front and back, that the circle is well covered, that they're not stepping on the edge of the circle. 2 officials in the field. And why do you want 2 officials? Because discus is hard to judge. It doesn't usually leave a mark. Occasionally it will, and they need to be getting there quickly. It's going out a long ways. You want them covering that very well. Okay. You've got the same people, tape or EDM there. Someone marking, again, that should be official, doing a first marking. You've also got the clock, or the clock here, and the indicator board, someone watching the athletes and the implements, and a couple of retrievers. The other thing we do have in discus, because wind is a factor, you do have a windsock. So again, volunteers and officials. Anyone who is judging anything that's happening in the circle should be an official. Your markers in the field should be an official. And whoever is doing the first recording and the clock should be an official. Again, you can have a touch on the first spin if they're doing a spin, but it cannot be for propulsion. It can be an incidental touch, but only if it's in the back half of the circle. Again, the setup, as we had said, you've got a windsock. You probably want a foot mat. There's a lot of grass around. Athlete benches, again, on either side, but if the athletes are here, your tape or your EDM is on this side. And you've got a windsock, of course. Clock in the back half. That's the one thing that isn't on these, but the clock is always where the athlete can see it while they're in their initial turns. So in the back of the circle, behind, but off to one side, not directly behind. And that goes for all of the throws, so, or all of the throws out of a circle. We'll move on to hammer, very similar to discus, except we now have a smaller circle, like a shot circle, just over 2 meters, 2.1 meter. Same 35-degree sector, but you now have the wings. Okay. Before you start your event, find out where those wings need to close to for each side. So from the center line, here's your center line, 1.2 meters. Okay, that's where the wings close to. Which one do you close? Okay, the rules say if it's someone who is throwing clockwise, you throw the right-handed, and someone who is throwing counterclockwise, you do the left side. Simple. Look into the cage. So you're standing at the front of the cage, you're standing here. You're looking at the circle. Okay, you've got your wing on one side, wing on the other side. Someone who comes in is right-handed, he's throwing clockwise. Throw the one, you close the one on the right. So you would close this one. Okay, and conversely, if you've got a left-handed thrower, fortunately, not many of them, but there are a number, and again, face into the hammer cage and say, okay, left-handed thrower, a little seems to work for me, so we will move on. The officials, very similar to a discus. You've got probably 3 people watching the circle. The chief judge, 1, 2, 3. They're moving fast, so you need to watch that they're not stepping on the circle. They've only got 1 person in the field for hammer, unless you're in a really, really dry area, probably enough, but they may be way out there and then someone after them is throwing very short. So preferably 2, but you can manage with 1. It's going to make a big hole, especially on a wet field. One that came in this last year when I was at Nationals was a replacement trial. The hammer broke during the competition. So not the athlete's fault. Okay, he gets a replacement trial, and that's Rule 2518. Okay, if it happens right then, he gets a replacement throw. It's as if that one never happened. There is no change in order, so it happens immediately. And what the rule says, give them a reasonable time to go in and get their replacement trial. So if you have a good referee, they can stall it a bit for them, let them catch their breath. You could also go, okay, this is consecutive, maybe 2 minutes, but don't delay it overly. So, equipment setup, again, very similar. The one additional thing you'll probably want to have is a ladder, because the hammers do get caught up on the cage. Again, they're heavy. You don't need a windsock here. And again, here's your athlete benches. So the EDM or the tape would be on this side. Javelin, again, we saw this one, how it was set up. So we'll just move on. So Javelin officials, sending them. So you'll have 2 officials probably at the line, one on one side, one on the other, one being a chief judge, and one watching the line. So they're watching that the athlete doesn't step on or over the line. 2 officials who are judging the landing, a 3rd official in the field who is watching for the landing. So is it flat? Is it a valid throw? You need to use hand signals, not flags. No second set of flags out in the field, ever. There is 1 set of flags only to be used. So find a signal that works for the person in the field and the chief judge. So the one that I tend to use, that I work with my officials, is this, flat. Kind of looks like safe, but it's a big movement, and so you can see it, and until that flag goes up, the person in the field leaves their arms out. So that way you can see that yes, they're calling it flat, otherwise no motion is made. If there is no motion, it's a good throw, and that way there's not a lot of confusion as to whether it's a good throw or not. The other thing you will see that you need to mark is your 4 meter mark, and that is 4 meters back from the line, from the finish, or from the throwing line, the start of the arc there. And that is when the athlete walks back, doesn't exit, so they walk back behind that 4 meter mark. They are considered to have exited at that point. They may be looking at their beautiful throw and just walking backwards. Okay, just watch them walk backwards. And once they get to the back, okay, once they get to that 4 meter mark, you're exited. So, setup, again, we need a windsock for javelin. It can be affected. If the athletes are here, your tape and EDM is on this side. Indicator board, time clock, somewhere over here or over here, so the athlete can see it on the runway and the official can see it. That is the important thing you need to know, is that when you are setting up a time clock, the chief judge, whoever has the flags, needs to be able to see that time clock. Okay, so that's each of the sectors, the sites, setting up officials. So we'll just go through a few tips for officials prior to your meet. Okay, find out what are the records. What records are you looking at for each of the events? Who are the officials working? What is your experience? If you haven't worked for them or worked with them before, look it up. Go on Athletics Canada site, see what their rating is or their level is. Are there multiple teams? Who's assigned to which team? And look at the number of competitors in each event. You might want to note the records. Especially true, this is especially true if you are the chief or the referee, but it's a good idea for officials to know what is going on before as well. So go and check it out. Prior to the competition, this will happen probably in the initial officials meeting, if there is one, what the awards procedure is. Find out what it is, make sure that you know, and assign officials for duties. I'm talking about the chief here, and ensure you spread the duties around. Don't keep the same person at the same duty. So 2 people watching the circle at all times, 2 people watching landings. If you are pulling tape, 2 people reading that tape. So go into the circle, 2 sets of eyes on that tape. We can all make mistakes. And 2 sets of records at least. So 2 people recording distances. Find out how many volunteers you have. And when they show up, what is their experience? Are they experienced volunteers or are they brand new? During the competition, so you're starting up, ask athletes if they have another competition. So they may be disappearing on you. Clear instructions to the athletes. And most importantly, tell them where the competition area is. So you have to stay in this area. You can't go over there. Determine the warm-up time. Use your clock. Okay, so if you've got a countdown clock, when the athletes show up, say, there is your warm-up time. It will count down to 0. When it gets to 0, we will begin the competition and start on time. Ensure the area is quiet. So that means officials, you're not talking at the circle or in the field. Ensure that the athletes are quiet, spectators are quiet. This is especially important. Coordinate with other events. For javelin, your runway may run out onto the track. So if it is, you'll have to coordinate with the track officials. There may be a pole vault running through the middle of your javelin. You have to coordinate with them. Often there may be a start line right next to where you are holding a competition. So be aware of when the gun is. Okay, if the gun is ready to go off, hold your athletes. You're trying to be fair to all your athletes, so you don't want a gun going off for an athlete right when they're about to throw. And again, if there is something else in the vicinity, watch the noise that you are making so that you're not interfering with the other event. And above all, safety, because these are implements that can injure, that can kill. So safety above all. During the competition, place your officials so that, first of all, the official has the proper view. That is one of them, are the most important. If the official doesn't have a proper view, it's not a fair competition. Allow the spectators a good view. Cameras. There's going to be cameras out there, television cameras in some meets. Okay, so you may have to adjust where you put people. EDMs and prisms. Where do you put them so that they're not interfering with the sight lines, or that athletes don't go into the prism site? So again, on the opposite side from where athletes are seated. I'll just have a few notes for para-competition, because para-competition for throws can be a bit more challenging. And where I'm looking at, these are seated throws. So you now have a throwing frame, and the athlete is strapped into a throwing frame. First of all, maximum height of 75 centimeters. These frames are measured before they come out to you. However, they may have brought another cushion. That may not be the same cushion that went into the room, or it may not have even had a cushion. So just take a quick tape measure if you're not sure. And okay, this one is okay, the cushion is okay. So the other things, no springs, no part of the frame shall move. That's so that you're not getting assistance from the frame. And when the frame is positioned properly, all parts of the frame are in the vertical plane of the rim of the circle. So especially watch for handholds, that none of it is outside, and foot plates can sometimes be outside. So just watch for those when they get placed in. So there are time limits once the frame is turned over to the athlete, and the time limit, or the frames are tied down. The team will then say to the athlete, is this okay? And they will, once they give their okay, it is now either 4 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on the ability of the athlete. And if they have an assistant, as soon as the athlete has been strapped into the frame, they must leave the throwing area, go back to their seating area. The time limits, and this is where a clock is very useful. Time limits include securing to the chair and warm-ups. So once it's turned over, that athlete has to be secured into the chair and do any warm-ups. If they haven't been secured, they are now into competition time. So 4 minutes go by. Okay, they're still not properly strapped in. Their warm-ups are done. And this is first throw, 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute when the implement would be presented to the athlete. So the official now presents the implement. And if that 1 minute passes, that's considered a pass, and so on. So timing, 1 minute from when the implement is presented. You measure after every throw and then present another implement. There are 2 minutes between rounds 3 and 4, and then just go into rounds 5 and 6 after that. The technique is the same as for all other athletes, but in the seated one, both legs must be in contact with the seat from the back of their knee all the way through the back of their butt. You might hear the term lifting, and that's what that is referring to. So other notes for para, F11, which are visually impaired, require opaque glasses. F11 and F12, again, both visually impaired, can have assistant bring them into the competition area, orient them, and then they leave. And the assistant has to leave. Coaches in the designated coaching area, assistants in their designated area. Okay, time frames. Now these may be adjusted depending on the meet, how far the call room is away from the events, but this is a rough guideline. So prior to your start time, referee and the chief judge inspect the site, make sure everything is there, make sure that the equipment will be coming out. An hour before, officials meet, go over their duties, walk out 5 minutes later in an orderly manner. So, you know, that nice little straight line as we walk out. Again, this is an approximate, so about 50 minutes before your start time. Again, check at your initial officials meeting when they want you to pick them up. Pick the athletes up, 2 officials or an official and a volunteer to bring up the athletes to the event. So usually if I'm chiefing, I will go and pick them up. If I have any information I need to pass on, any instructions, that's where I will do it. Or if we need to vacate, I will speak to them right outside of the call room, simply because you have them captive there. Once they get to the site, they are getting in their head and they're not going to listen to you. So about 45 minutes, open up the circle or the runway for the warm-up. Make sure you've got officials out in the field so that they can supervise what's going on out in the field, someone watching the implements. Normally what we've been doing is basically a free warm-up. It does say in the rule book that they are to warm up in the same order, so in their throwing order. Sometimes it's easier to just say, there is your time clock, that is your warm-up time. So if you need to, you know, take a break. So we're not calling names. So we're just going. So 5 minutes before, there will be introductions. Line them up on the sector line in their throwing order, and tell them that once you are announced, we will wait for the start time and we will begin our throws. So 0 minutes. If you're starting at 10 o'clock, you start at 10 o'clock, not 10:05, not 5 minutes to 10. Finally, your event sheets should have start and finish time, just in case you have a protest, not only for nationals, that should be for all meets. Signature of the recording official, signature of the chief, of the referee, if you've got ITOs, and any records should be verified by the referee. For national events, you need to identify who should be the medalists, inform them of the time of the award procedure. If there is doping control at your event, if they show up earlier, just stop them. Okay, I don't want to know who. Sit there till ask me when the competition is over, and they will take care of that athlete from that point. The rest of your athletes, gather them up, have someone, one of the officials, walk them out through post control, clean up the site, and walk off site, again in a nice orderly manner. After the event, if at all possible, debrief. What did we do well? What didn't work? Okay, what do we need to do better for the next event? And that's about it. We will move into questions now. So
I think Serge has left us, but
Not here.
nope.
Oh, Serge is there. Okay, I was just going to say, if you have a question, if you would unmute your computer, identify yourself, and ask Irene your question, and she will answer it for you. So are there any questions?
This is Carol Deweese, and I don't have a question per se directly about the rules, but about a procedure that's a difference between maybe the US and Canada.
Okay.
When we have video as a referee, I often will look at the video and will override the decision of the officials. Therefore, typically, the only time we have that kind of video is in large meets, which means we're using EDM. So when we're using EDM, our practice is that the person beside the EDM is keeping what we call a dark sheet. Literally, whether it's a foul or fair, every mark is going down. So if we override a decision by the officials, we're able to go back and find out what that mark was. Do you do that in Canada?
Yes. Yes, we, even if there is an EDM, there is a paper backup, always. And at a large meet, I have always done at least 2 paper backups. As a referee, I will often have my own paper backup. So
that's why I brought it up, because you didn't mention it. And in major meets, that often happens when you've got the detailed video, that you can see stuff on the video that you can't, when you slow it down, you can't see with the human eye. And I've actually had instances where I've gone to officials and told them, by the human eye, you made the right call, but when we looked at the video, it was wrong. Therefore, we've had to reverse you. And so, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up as good practice. Certainly if you have electronic measurement, measure everything. Don't take anything for granted unless it's a clear sector foul, then you just mark it as sector. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah. When in doubt, measure everything. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, it's Pritam over here. I have a question for you. For those athletes that come with a personal implement, could you give some more information? How do they get back their implement if the competition is done, is it right away they can pick it up and go, or can you please give some more details, please?
Okay. For a major meet, any implements have to be checked in through the technical area, and as an official on the site, you are given X number of implements, and they have a sheet and says, okay, these are the number of implements. Those are the number of implements that go back. They cannot take them at the site. They need to go back through technical and claim them there, because implements have been lost and they are not inexpensive. If it's a small meet, if they've brought implements, okay, that's a whole different story. If there isn't a technical control, yes, you can let them take it. But in general, just say, okay, these have been, you drop them off to get measured, to get weighed, and what they were brought out, they have to go back the same way, and you go pick them up where you dropped them off.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Irene? Going once, going twice. Last chance to ask a question on throws. On behalf of the National Officials Committee, I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. And I'd also like to thank Irene for preparing the webinar today and presenting to us. And just stay tuned, everybody. We're taking a bit of a break for the month of July now. And later in August, we might be hosting some more webinars. So we will definitely send out notices if and when they occur. But I wish you a happy, healthy, safe summer. And once again, thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Irene, for presenting this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice show, Irene.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
Night out.
Nice job,
Thank you.
Irene. Thanks very much.
Lovely meeting.
Thank you, Irene. It was a good.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, Lily.